I want to read you something. It is from a letter written in 1849 by a man who had just been told he was going to die. He wrote, "Life is a gift, life is happiness. Every minute can be an eternity of happiness." He was standing in front of a firing squad when he wrote those words in his mind. His name was Fyodor Dostoevsky, and 30 seconds before the bullets were supposed to tear through his chest, a messenger arrived on horseback with a pardon from the Tsar. The execution was fake. It was political theater designed to break the prisoners psychologically before sending them to Siberia. Dostoevsky would spend the next 4 years in a labor camp where he was beaten, starved, and chained to murderers and rapists. And when he came out, he wrote some of the most psychologically accurate books about human suffering ever created. Books that describe exactly what it feels like to hate yourself, to sabotage your own life, to feel like you are watching yourself make terrible decisions and being unable to stop. If you have ever felt like your brain is trying to destroy you, Dostoevsky wrote the manual on why. And the strangest part, he said suffering might be the only thing that makes you real. Let me tell you who Fyodor Dostoevsky was in one sentence. He was a 19th century Russian novelist who nearly died multiple times, went to prison for reading banned books, became addicted to gambling, and then wrote novels about people who think themselves into paralysis and self-destruction. The problem his life wrestled with was this: if humans have free will, why do we use it to hurt ourselves? Why do intelligent people make stupid decisions? Why do we know what is good for us and then do the opposite? And why does suffering seem to be the only thing that wakes us up? By the end of this, you will understand why Dostoevsky believed that consciousness itself might be a disease, why he thought underground spite is more honest than surface-level happiness, and why he was convinced that the worst thing you can do to a human being is give them everything they want. You are going to see yourself in his characters, and you might not like what you find. Dostoevsky was born in 1821 in Moscow. His father was a military doctor and a violent alcoholic who abused his serfs so badly that they eventually murdered him. Fyodor was 17 when that happened. Before that, his mother died of tuberculosis when he was 15. So by the time he was a teenager, he had already learned that the world is brutal, that authority figures are cruel, and that death comes for everyone without asking permission. He was a sensitive kid, anxious, prone to brooding. He read obsessively. He loved Gothic novels and stories about crime and punishment, which is darkly ironic given what happened next. In his 20s, Dostoevsky moved to St. Petersburg and started writing. His first novel, Poor Folk, was a huge success. He was celebrated, invited to literary salons, praised by critics, and then he made a mistake. He joined a progressive intellectual group that read banned books and discussed socialist ideas. In 1849, the Tsar's secret police arrested the entire group. Dostoevsky was convicted of revolutionary activity and sentenced to death. That is when the fake execution happened. They tied him and the others to posts in the middle of a frozen square. They put hoods over their heads. Dostoevsky heard the soldiers load their rifles. He thought about his life. He thought about God. He thought about how strange it was that in a few seconds he would not exist. And then the messenger came, and the sentence was commuted to 4 years hard labor in Siberia, plus another 4 years of military service. You might think a pardon is a relief, but imagine this. You prepare yourself to die, you make peace with it. You let go, and then, at the last possible second, they tell you it was all a joke. You are not dying today. Instead, you are going to a frozen prison camp where you will be worked like an animal, where you will sleep on wooden planks in sub-zero cold, where you will be surrounded by criminals who hate intellectuals. Dostoevsky later said the experience shattered him. He had epileptic seizures for the rest of his life, possibly triggered by the trauma. He lost his faith in progressive politics. He became obsessed with the idea that suffering reveals truth in a way comfort never can. When Dostoevsky returned from Siberia, he was a different man. He had seen what human beings are capable of when you strip away civilization. He had lived with murderers, thieves, men who felt no guilt, and he realized something that disturbed him. They were not monsters. They were just people, people who had made choices, people who had freedom and used it to destroy themselves and others. This became his obsession. Why do people choose destruction? He started writing again, but now his books were darker, stranger, more psychologically ruthless. In 1864, he published Notes from Underground, a short novel about a man who hates everyone, including himself. The underground man is spiteful, petty, paralyzed by overthinking. He sabotages his own happiness out of pride. He pushes away anyone who tries to help him, and he knows he is doing it. That is the key. He is self-aware enough to see his own dysfunction, but not strong enough to stop it. Does that sound familiar? That feeling of watching yourself make bad decisions, knowing they are bad, and doing them anyway because some part of you wants to prove that you are free, that no one can tell you what to do, not even your own rational mind. Dostoevsky called this underground spite. It is the part of you that would rather suffer and be free than be happy and controlled. The underground man says something chilling. Man is sometimes extraordinarily, passionately in love with suffering. He means that we cling to our pain because it proves we exist. If you are suffering, you are real. You are not just a cog in a machine. You are not just another optimized, productive, well-adjusted person doing what society tells you to do. You are a conscious being who can say no, even if that no destroys you. Let me make this concrete. You are scrolling through social media at 2 in the morning, even though you know it is making you feel worse. You are not scrolling because you are enjoying it. You are scrolling because some part of you wants to feel bad. You want to see people doing better than you so you can feed the narrative that you are behind, that you are failing, that you will never catch up. Or you are in a relationship that is clearly wrong for you, but you stay because leaving would mean admitting you wasted time, admitting you made a mistake, admitting you are not in control. Or you are procrastinating on something important, and you know the deadline is coming, and you know you are going to hate yourself later, but you do it anyway because in this moment. Procrastinating is your choice. No one is making you do it. It is your small rebellion against the pressure to perform. Dostoevsky understood this. He knew that humans would rather be miserable and free than happy and controlled. And he knew that this creates a problem, because if suffering is how we prove we are real, then we will never stop suffering. We will sabotage every attempt to make life better because deep down we do not trust happiness. Happiness feels fake. Happiness feels like a trap. After Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky wrote Crime and Punishment. It is about a young man named Raskolnikov who convinces himself he is superior to ordinary morality. He thinks he is special, that the rules do not apply to him, that he can commit murder and feel nothing because he is intellectually above guilt. So he kills an old woman, a pawnbroker, with an axe, and then he discovers that he is not above guilt at all. The guilt eats him alive. He becomes paranoid, feverish, unable to sleep. He thought he was Nietzsche's Superman, but he is just a kid who made a terrible choice and now has to live with it. The book is not really about crime. It is about the psychology of someone who thinks they can outsmart their own conscience. And what Dostoevsky shows is that you cannot. You can rationalize anything in your head, but your body keeps the score. Your nervous system knows. You can tell yourself you are fine, but you will not sleep. You will not eat. You will flinch at every sound. Raskolnikov spends the entire novel trying to convince himself he did nothing wrong, and he fails because his guilt is not a thought. It is a physical reality. Now, here is where Dostoevsky gets dangerous. He was not just writing about guilt. He was writing about what happens when you remove all external meaning from life. Raskolnikov kills because he has read too much philosophy. He has absorbed the idea that if God does not exist, then everything is permitted. If there is no ultimate judge, no cosmic law, then morality is just a social construct. And if morality is just a construct, then a smart person can see through it and act however they want. This is the dark side of intellectual freedom. Once you realize that meaning is not given to you, that you have to create it yourself, you also realize that you could create any meaning. You could decide that your life matters more than someone else's. You could decide that your ambitions justify any cost. You could become a monster, and there would be no metaphysical force stopping you. Only your own psychology. Only guilt, and Dostoevsky is saying guilt is real. It is not just a social program installed in your brain. It is something deeper. When you violate another person, you violate yourself. You fracture, and no amount of rationalization will put you back together. Dostoevsky spent his entire life testing this idea. After Crime and Punishment, he wrote The Idiot, about a man who is too good for the world and gets destroyed by it. Then he wrote Demons, about political radicals who think they can build a utopia and end up causing chaos and murder. And then, near the end of his life, he wrote The Brothers Karamazov, which is about three brothers who represent three different responses to the problem of suffering. One brother is an intellectual who cannot believe in God because of all the pain in the world. One brother is a hedonist who just wants pleasure and does not care about meaning. And one brother is a monk who has faith despite everything. The book does not tell you which brother is right. It lets them argue, it lets them suffer, it lets them make their choices, and what you realize reading it is that Dostoevsky is not trying to give you answers. He is trying to show you what it feels like to be a conscious human being trapped in a world that does not make sense. Now let us talk about what this cost him. Dostoevsky was not a stable person. He was neurotic, obsessive, and after his time in Siberia, he developed a gambling addiction that nearly ruined him. He would go to casinos in Europe and lose everything. Not just his money, everything. He would pawn his wife's jewelry, borrow from friends, gamble it all away, and then write frantic letters begging for more. Why? Because gambling gave him the same thing his characters were searching for. It gave him intensity. It gave him risk. It gave him the feeling that something was happening, that he was alive, that this moment mattered. When you are sitting at a roulette table, you are not thinking about your existential dread. You are not worried about whether life has meaning. You are focused on one thing, the wheel, and for a person like Dostoevsky, whose mind never stopped spiraling, that focus was addictive. He also lived in constant debt. He signed contracts with publishers that required him to deliver novels on impossible deadlines, and if he missed them, they would own the rights to all his future work. He wrote The Gambler in 26 days because he had no choice. He dictated it to a stenographer who later became his wife. His first wife had died of tuberculosis. His brother died and left him with enormous debts. His young son died of epilepsy. Dostoevsky knew suffering intimately, and he channeled it into his work. But here is the cost. His characters are so psychologically real because he put his own demons into them. When you read about Raskolnikov's guilt, you are reading about Dostoevsky's guilt. When you read about the underground man's spite, you are reading about Dostoevsky's spite. He did not have the luxury of writing from a detached, objective perspective. He was writing from inside the wound. And this brings us to the danger of his ideas. If you take Dostoevsky too literally, you can end up romanticizing suffering. You can convince yourself that pain is noble, that struggle is proof of depth, that if you are not miserable, you are not living authentically. This is a trap. Dostoevsky did not say suffering is good. He said suffering is inevitable, and the question is what you do with it. Do you let it break you, or do you let it wake you up? Do you use it as an excuse to hurt others, or do you use it to understand them? The underground man suffers and becomes bitter. Raskolnikov suffers and eventually finds redemption. The difference is not the suffering. It is the choice they make about what it means. You can meet people today who have read Dostoevsky and decided that being miserable makes them interesting. They wear their anxiety like a badge. They talk about their existential dread as if it makes them deeper than everyone else. And maybe it does in a way, but it also makes them exhausting, because suffering without transformation is just suffering. It is not wisdom, it is not growth, it is just pain. So what does this mean for you? Here is the first thing. Stop pretending you are rational. You are not. Dostoevsky showed that human beings are not logical creatures who occasionally make mistakes. We are contradictory, self-sabotaging, emotional animals who sometimes manage to think clearly. You will make decisions that do not make sense. You will hurt yourself for no reason. You will choose short-term spite over long-term happiness. And when you do, do not be surprised. That is what humans do. The goal is not to become perfectly rational. The goal is to notice when you are in underground mode, when you are choosing suffering just to prove you are free, and ask yourself, is this actually what I want, or am I just being spiteful? Second, sit with your guilt instead of rationalizing it away. If you did something wrong, feel it. Do not immediately jump to excuses or justifications or explanations. Raskolnikov tried to rationalize his way out of guilt, and it almost killed him. What saved him was finally admitting what he did and accepting the consequences. Guilt is not the enemy. Guilt is your conscience telling you that you violated your own values. Listen to it. It is information. Third, stop waiting for life to give you meaning. Dostoevsky's characters are all searching for something outside themselves to make life make sense. God, ideology, love, power. And what they discover is that meaning is not something you find. It is something you create through your choices. Every time you act with integrity, even when it is hard, you are creating meaning. Every time you choose honesty over comfort, you are building a self you can live with. Meaning is not a destination. It is a practice. Here is an experiment for you. For 1 week, every time you are about to do something self-destructive, pause and ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to, or am I doing this to prove I am free? Am I scrolling because I am bored, or am I scrolling because I want to feel bad? Am I picking this fight because I am hurt, or am I picking it because I want to be right? Just notice, do not judge yourself. Just notice the underground spite when it shows up, and then ask, what would I do if I were not trying to prove anything? What would I choose if I actually wanted to be happy? Dostoevsky died in 1881. He was 59 years old. 30,000 people attended his funeral. He had gone from a condemned prisoner to one of the most famous writers in Russia. But he never escaped his demons. He had epileptic seizures until the end. He worried about money. He worried about his family. He worried about Russia, and he kept writing because writing was the only way he knew how to make sense of the chaos inside him. His last words, according to his wife, were a request for her to read him the parable of the prodigal son from the Bible. It is a story about a young man who abandons his family, wastes his inheritance, and then comes home broken and ashamed, and his father forgives him. Dostoevsky spent his whole life writing about people who destroy themselves and then search for a way back. He knew that story because he lived it. So here is what I want you to take from this. You are not broken because you struggle. You are human because you struggle. Dostoevsky's characters are not cautionary tales. They are mirrors. When you recognize yourself in the underground man's spite, or Raskolnikov's guilt, or Ivan Karamazov's doubt, you are not discovering that you are damaged. You are discovering that you are awake. Most people sleepwalk through life. They follow scripts. They do what they are told. They never stop to ask why. You are here because you stopped. You asked why. You notice the gap between who you are and who you are supposed to be. That is consciousness, and yes, it hurts. Dostoevsky said consciousness is a disease. He meant that once you see the game, you cannot unsee it. Once you realize that meaning is not given, you cannot go back to pretending it is. You have to build it yourself. And that is terrifying, but it is also the only way to be free. Dostoevsky predicted your mental breakdown because he lived through his own. He knew what it feels like to watch yourself fall apart. He knew what it feels like to stand in front of a firing squad, literal or metaphorical, and realize that everything you thought mattered does not. And then he kept going. He wrote, he loved, he failed, he tried again, he did not find peace, but he found something else. He found the strength to keep choosing even when every choice felt impossible. That is what his books are really about. Not suffering for its own sake, but the possibility that on the other side of suffering, if you do not run from it, if you do not numb it, if you actually face it, you might become real. Not happy, not fixed, but real, and maybe that is enough.